I taught math in a Chicago Public District neighborhood high school. For 8 years I taught there. I was a member of the Chicago Teachers Union for 7 years. I enjoyed my time there immensely. There was great students. There were many really excellent teachers there, but certainly the achievement of the students was much less than it should have been. And my wife at the same time was teaching at a South Side Chicago neighborhood high school and saw similar things going on where there was a lot of potential students had they just weren't able to reach. And we thought the two biggest reasons were that the school culture was such that it was both negative and disruptive, and it made it hard to teach and it made it hard for students to learn. And secondly, the average quality of teacher we thought could be much higher. And that's was our experience before the charter law was passed in Illinois, which is 1996. I think that the ability to serve students well really starts with having great teachers and great other adults in various roles in the school, and the ability for myself and my wife as teachers to choose our fellow teachers and other administrators, as well as be able to reward them based on performance in some measure, to be able to dismiss those who were severely lacking and do it expediently. All of those really enhanced our ability to have a higher quality of teacher on average at our first school, and I think that's continued as we've served more and more students through now 17 high schools. My wife and I first started to apply for the charter school in 1997. My wife, Tanya, had worked with two teachers who had applied for and received one of the very first charter schools in Chicago called ACT Charter. That was my first exposure to charters, and I was able to see what they were doing on their design. They weren't open yet, but they had done the application, and then we were able to visit some charters that were already open across the country, and in 97 and 98 we took trips to Boston and to New York. The first charter school that I saw was City on the Hill in Boston, Massachusetts, and the second was the Academy of the Pacific Rim. In both of them I saw a much different culture, school culture and atmosphere than I'd seen in the school that I had taught, where there was definitely orderliness, there was high expectations for student behavior and academic achievement, there was a positivity, a college emphasis, and from those first two visits I learned quite a bit. I did not go to New York, but I know some of our fellow teachers went to a New York trip and saw many schools there. In Chicago in 98, schools like Perspectives and North Lawndale College Prep were now open, and I visited them and saw, I remember school uniforms was one thing I thought that, yeah, that seems to work well in a charter school. And also saw, again, a real big emphasis on social, emotional support and college-going culture. I remember when I was at City on the Hill, it was my very first visit to a charter school, and they were telling the students they couldn't chew gum, and that was such a revelation to me because, you know, where I had taught that was just unthinkable that that would be monitored and mandated that not to chew gum. And you know, I remember thinking, wow, we could have a school where there's not dozens of pieces of gum stuck underneath each desk. And that was almost a goal of ours, that, you know, can we keep the gum away? And, you know, with sweating a small thing like the gum actually comes many other positive results. When I first thought about opening a charter with my wife, uniforms were not on our mind. We didn't think, oh, we got to have school uniforms. But seeing these early charters and the uniforms and realizing that there were several benefits. Probably the most important was that's where the tone could be set for orderliness and discipline, self-discipline especially, that if they could remember to tuck in your shirt and bring a belt and tie their shoes and wear the proper uniform, that while that didn't help them learn by itself, it did help them develop really positive habits of taking good care of themselves, of remembering things, of keeping the extra belt in the locker, you know, of making sure they tie their shoes in a way they don't come untied. And that has lots of benefits, I think, throughout life, as well as orderliness in the school. And the other thing with, you know, many inner city schools, gangs can be an issue, and if everyone's in the same uniform, it was really hard to represent gang affiliation, and that helped. And I think most people who are affiliated with gangs don't want to represent, but if you make it easy, they have to, and we made it really hard. And finally, there was no issue with keeping up with the Joneses on the back in the day. It was the Jordans, of course, and everyone wanted to wear Jordans, but not everyone could afford it. Well, no one wore Jordans at our schools, and I think that was actually a benefit. Somewhere around 2004, we were invited by the Walton Foundation to develop a plan to open more campuses. So we had one school for 5 years, and it was doing well, and we thought we could serve more students. We had hundreds every year who didn't get into our school and were on a waiting list. And so we were excited for that possibility, but we did need to plan. That $50,000 seed money really helped us plan, and part of that planning process was a two-day conference in Denver, and many of these other early charter entrepreneurs were there too. And you know, it's interesting that many of those same people are now a huge part of the movement, and it was eye-opening, I think, for all of us to see that so many around the country had some of the similar ideas and desire to serve more students. No matter how poor your memory is, no one forgets Don Shalvey. He was you know, larger than life, really pioneer in the charter world, and I think we were all impressed by him early, and just his enthusiasm and the work he'd already done, and having been a district superintendent, he had lots of credibility in this field. But yeah, I remember meeting Norm Atkins, and you know, I'd seen the video that, or I guess the documentary that Clarence Page had done on North Star, and so it was kind of cool to meet Norm in the flesh, and there were others from various charter networks across or at the time, mostly single-site charters, but soon-to-be network leaders. As far as CMOs go, we're all in some ways competitors, but the camaraderie seems to definitely overcome any competition, and with KIPP and Noble, I think that happened especially well. You know, it's a great story to start. We opened in fall of '99, the same fall that 60 Minutes and did their story on KIPP. And I happened to be sitting at my TV seeing the preview with the little stopwatch clicking and seeing, hey, that's a story I should tape. So I stuck my tape into my VCR and watched it, saw it, and said, this is what our students need to see. So the next Monday, we brought all the students. At the time, we only had 125 freshmen, but they all saw the next day, hot off the press, the KIPP story, and wanted them to know, hey, they're not the only students in the country that are wearing uniforms, working long hours, expected to achieve a lot academically in terms of you know, behavior. And that really helped, I think. And little did I know that from that 60 Minutes piece, KIPP would go from 2 schools to you know, dozens, and now well over 100 schools. But we not only had that really nice video to show, but then through some connections that Dave Levin had, we ended up being a site for KIPP to intern their principals when they expanded. So they expanded earlier than we did, right, you know, not too long after that, fall of '99, 60 Minutes video program. And then for 2 years, we interned their principals, several of whom still work for KIPP, and so we continue to enjoy that relation, and we've had great relations with Dave Levin and Mike Feinberg, and Mike Feinberg grew up in the Chicago area, so he has a great connection with us. And now we work really well with the KIPP schools in Chicago, and they've actually decided they're going to let us just do the high schools, and so they're just going to stick with K to 8 in Chicago, and many of their 8th graders go on to Noble, and we're so glad they do. In some ways, we take it as a compliment when we get lots of pushback. I think that often is the case, but you know, what we really need to do, I think, as Noble and as really top CMOs is to just keep producing great results. And while that will lead to greater pushback, it also leads to greater support. And you know, I think in the end that will win out, that the results for students, and you know, if you can keep those strong, and you know, you do have to tell your story still, and you know, there are things that you have to do on the ground with communities, but at the end of the day, if if excellence is your North Star, you'll get the pushback, but you also get the support, and I anticipate that these really top charters will weather these storms and continue to be able to serve more students.